Hiya folks, I just thought I'd do a quick video to talk about some of the basics around how to build both strength and cardio at the same time. It's a really common question I get, and I think it's a really easy issue to overcomplicate, and so I wanted to give you some actionable bits and pieces that you can put into your own training to try and improve both of these at the same time, because they absolutely are improvable at the same time. Really, the only people in the world who are going to negatively affect one or the other are the elite athletes, the elite marathon runners, the elite ultra marathoners, the elite powerlifters, the elite Olympic weightlifters. You know, for them, building too much of the other one is really going to negatively impact their training. I'll apologise because I've got chickens squawking in the background. Their food should have arrived today and it hasn't yet. Hopefully they don't drown me out. So with concurrent training, so building strength and endurance at the same time, we've got to think about what could negatively carry over to each other. So the first thing is intensity in your conditioning work, your endurance training, your cardio. If that's too high and we're going all in all the time, it is definitely going to make your strength training, your muscle building harder. You're going to be in a constantly depleted state, and eventually you'll start picking up injuries and overtraining. So your conditioning work does need to be based around steadier zone 2, zone 1 work with very specifically placed interval training. All right, that's going to be the sort of structure of our conditioning work, our cardio. In terms of your resistance training, really it depends on the way you're doing your cardio. If you're running, we just need to be careful with how we train our legs. If you're doing more sort of like CrossFit type training, using lots of different elements, then we just need to be aware of the impact that what we do in the gym will have an impact on that. So for example, you wouldn't want to be doing something like lots of kettlebell swings. You wouldn't want to do like 100 kettlebell swings in a conditioning piece. So 10 rounds of row 500 meters, 10 kettlebell swings, rest 60 seconds, the day before you deadlift heavy. Because the kettlebell swing is a hinging movement and the deadlift is a hinging movement, so they're going to negatively impact each other. What you might do is you might do that 2 days before or 2 days after you deadlift, or on the same day that you deadlift, so you consolidate that stressor. So in terms of how I would think about structuring my training based on the average person, I'd be thinking about, and I actually spoke to someone this morning on a consult about this, I'd be thinking about maybe 3 days in the gym. A squat and a pull day, a hinge and a push day, and an interval training day, assuming that your interval training is done in the gym. And then maybe a 4th session in the week, which is a longer cardio day. For me, that's running every time. I like to go out on long, steady runs in the hills around here. That's, for me, like very enjoyable, but you've got to find what you enjoy. If you're watching this video, you probably have an idea of that already. That is zone 1, zone 2. So conversational pace. All right, you should finish it and have plenty more left in the tank. 60 to 90 minutes is what you're aiming for. You might need to build up to that. In terms of your strength work, you can pick one of those strength training sessions to add in your intervals, or you can do them in that 3rd separate session. The intervals, the main key with doing these aerobic power intervals around our conditioning, around our strength training, is that they still need to be sustainable. So that higher intensity of conditioning work still has to be sustainable. So maybe you're doing 2-minute intervals on the rower with a minute rest. That has to be done at the same pace each set. And you might start with 6 sets in week 1, and week 10 you're on sort of like 11, 12, 15 sets. You build that volume, which is your base, and then you come back and you add intensity by going a bit quicker. And then you build that volume again. You come back, add intensity by going a bit quicker. Build that volume again. You could go on ad nauseum, and when you reach your limit, or you reach your limit in terms of time, intensity, what you can actually do, I would go back and retest either what you're trying to improve, or we think of another way of doing it. So it might be you do 60 seconds rowing, 60 seconds burpee, 60 seconds rest, mix it up out of interest. When we're picking our interval training, if we are doing sort of CrossFit type training, we want to be picking movements that complement what we've just done in the session. So if I do day 2 is deadlift and bench press, I'm probably not going to do hundreds of burpees the next day in my conditioning session. Those burpees, that continual pressing movement of the burpees, will really be hampered by the bench press the day before if you've gone hard enough in that. Likewise, I wouldn't do tons of deadlifts in that conditioning session. I wouldn't do tons of kettlebell swings. What might be better is maybe to do some lunging or some squat patterns, or maybe something that doesn't exacerbate a specific movement pattern. Rowing and assault bike intervals together. So we're trying to think about how all these sessions impact each other. I'm also thinking about, if I'm getting into a phase of training where I'm going fairly hard in my strength work, I want to keep my long, slow, easy aerobic work kind of away from that at the other end of the week, because we're sending quite mixed messages to the body. If I'm doing very, very intense strength training on day 1 and the day after I'm going on a very long, slow, easy run, I would say that there's a bit of a mixed messaging for the body. It may be better having your more intense strength training at the beginning of the week, like Monday to Thursday, have a couple of days off, and then maybe you do your longer run at the end of the week. That can be fairly tricky to fit into a 7-day week sometimes, I find, if you're not recovering well enough. But if you're getting your recovery on point, which is a whole other video or set of videos or lifetime of chatting, if you're getting your recovery on point, you should be able to go fairly heavy on Monday, fairly heavy on Wednesday, rest Thursday, and then do some long, slow aerobic work on maybe Friday or Saturday. And then you recover on Sunday to go back into it. That's how I would think about that if we're really pushing the strength training. For me at the moment, for example, I'm in a general accumulation phase of training. So I train 4, maybe 5 times a week. I'm not going particularly long on my runs. Time is tight with a little sort of 6-month-old baby. In terms of in the gym, I'm doing sort of slightly higher reps, slightly higher time under tension, trying to build some volume there. So I can basically do all of that, and it doesn't really impact it. My runs are sort of 30 to 50 minutes, sometimes 60. I'm not getting loads of elevation in the hills, so my legs aren't completely shot to bits. My interval training is very sort of moderate, 80% effort, and that's mostly mixed modal stuff in the gym. I use the bike a lot because it's low eccentric loading, so it doesn't fuck me. Running hard, so something to note about cardio and strength is that running is an eccentrically loaded activity. All you need to know is it causes a lot of damage to the muscle tissues, and it has an impact on the nervous system. Not in a negative way, but it can very negatively carry over to your lower body training. So if you push hard in a running session, squats the next day probably aren't the best idea. So that's what I meant at the beginning when I said about running and lower body work. You've got to be really careful about how you sort of put that in. I particularly find that if I squat too heavy close to a tough or very long running session, I get problems with my knees. Everyone will be slightly different. I always find deadlifting and running a slightly easier combo in terms of being closer together. I get tired legs from deadlifting, and a tired lower back, and tired upper back, and tired glutes. Anyway, but I don't find it leads to niggles as much. Whereas running and squatting definitely for me doesn't mix very well. And you've got to kind of listen to your body around that. If you're starting to get niggles with a certain pattern of training, look at what you're doing and how it relates to each other, and start to think about how you can change that. I hope this has been helpful. If you've got any questions, please do drop me an email, tom_mcpartland@hotmail.co.uk. If you're interested in coaching, My roadmap coaching program is up and running, and I'm working one-to-one with clients on that to completely change the way that their bodies function and feel. So drop me a line if you're interested in that, or visit my website, and I hope this has been of some use.